Ali, can I call on you to introduce yourself as one of our younger members? I assume you have the mute, unmute feature down to a cold, hard science. So if you could touch on what attracted you to Kiwanis and then just something light that you do for fun, please.
Hi, my name's Sarah Lee. I'm actually a Circle K International member at IUPUI, but I am a district treasurer as well of Indiana. I actually started in Key Club freshman year of high school, and I had no idea what it was, but I knew it had to do with service, and I was instantly interested in getting involved. But now here I am, a senior at IUPUI, and I major in neuroscience with a minor in medical sociology. And I definitely intend to join Kiwanis. Maybe a couple years after. I'm planning on going to professional school. I don't think I'll have a lot of time to join Kiwanis. But yeah, I'm happy to be here, and there are a few other people from IUPUI here. I think they have the camera off, but we're all happy to be here.
Great. No, thank you very much for joining us. Let me look around. Okay. Mr. Richard DeLeon, would you mind kind of introducing yourself to the group? I mean, as long as I've been attending our weekly meetings, I've seen you've been joining us a lot recently on Zoom. Would you mind just saying hi to everyone and give us something you like to do for fun, please?
Hi everyone, my name is Richard DeLeon. I've been a member since July. I mean, it hasn't been long, but I've been loving every meeting that I've been to. It's been a great opportunity to hear some interesting topics. I love technology, so I definitely understand how to use the mute and unmute functions.
No, that means a lot, Richard. We're always looking for help on the tech side. So when you look at our club's website or social presence, if there's anything you think we could be doing a little differently or to attract any extra eyes, I'd appreciate that feedback very much. Miss Karen Burns has some exciting news on the Salvation Army campaign this holiday season and how we have pivoted in this environment to do some good with the Salvation Army.
I was thinking you were going to keep talking, Eric, and I wasn't going to have to say anything. You were on a roll there. We are, I'm wearing both hats here. One is from the Kiwanis Foundation and one is as a former chair of the Salvation Army. And I see my other former chair colleague, Diane, in the screen as well. But the Fostering Families program, as you know, was not able to happen. And they have an allocation from the foundation for each year that they do the program for $10,000. And what they have done in the past is that they have dedicated any unspent funds from that to Christmas assistance. And so this year, the foundation and the committee have decided to donate the remainder of that fund to the Salvation Army's Angel Tree. And we've talked about that program. This is where we shop to make sure that children who can't afford to have a Christmas have a Christmas. And a lot of the things they ask for are things that that aren't the fun gifts. They're the gifts like clothing and shoes and coats. And then we always try to make sure they get something fun and special just for them. But this is really necessary. And so thanks to the committee and Chair Mary Imel and all of you, we are donating $9,000 to the Angel Tree program that's going to take care of 180 children's Christmases this year.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. And then,
and Eric, can I, since you gave me the microphone for a second, put in a plug? Every year, the Army goes out and rings, the Kiwanians go out and ring the bell for the Salvation Army, and we compete against the downtown Rotarians. And obviously, the winner is the Salvation Army and the people that we help in central Indiana. This year is going to be a little bit different and not so, I'm maybe not going in the direction you thought. This year, I've lost my bell ringing partner. Joe Marbaugh. And it's hard for me to think about this event and not think about Joe and all of his wonderful, quirky personality traits, but his very big heart. I'm looking for somebody else to help partner with this program. As we start to identify where we can ring, we believe we'll be able to ring at the Binford Kroger again, and that we'll be able to do that in person. And so we're just going to firm up the time slots and the dates and get ready to go out there and keep at least one much loved Christmas tradition intact. So if anyone would like to know more about what it takes, it's not too much of a heavy lift, but it is one of the more rewarding things we do. I could certainly use a partner or two in this project. So thank you. Thanks, Eric, for letting me do that.
Thank you, Karen. And again, so Richard, I'm going to kind of pick on you every meeting until you're a committee chair. So each holiday season, like Karen's saying, what the committee really entails is filling these time slots at a couple of different locations on a couple of days. It's a great way to meet and strong arm our members into participating and donating. And Richard, I do wish that you had a chance to meet this recently deceased member, Joe Marbaugh, because he was a character. He ran our interclub committees. He made sure that every Kiwanis club in central Indiana had a pulse on what our little larger club was doing with our $7 million endowment. But just please feel free to reach out to Karen on the bell ringing committee. She's been carrying the torch for a number of years. It's not a lot of work. It's focused around the holidays. We don't have a lot of meetings around the holidays. So it's you're kind of giving up one commitment for another, but just kind of keep that in the back of your mind. And so Richard, what Joe Marbaugh would do is he'd grab every person who walked by and guarantee to match them. He'd have a wad of $1 bills. So anybody put in $1, he would put in his own dollar. So that had kind of spread throughout the membership, where we're all giving as actively as the passerbys at Kroger or at Circle Center. But no, thanks, Karen, for your time. And thanks to the committee for making that decision to reallocate those funds. So and Greg, Karen is the executive vice president of the Indianapolis Zoo. So if you want to informally submit any resume while you're talking, you can always do that. No, seriously. But Graham, if you don't mind introducing today's speaker, please.
I will. Thank you, Mr. President. And it is an honor for me today to introduce Greg Dye, who directs the Duke Lemur Center. And before I read his bio, I would say I've been fortunate to be involved in a number of neat volunteering activities, but I think one of my favorites was volunteering for the Lemur Center. I can't mention this too often here at Butler, but I interned at Duke for a year. And during my year, I spent time at the Lemur Center, which probably besides Eagle Creek Park, my favorite place to run in the world is the Duke Forest. And the Duke Lemur Center is located in that forest, and it's just a beautiful center with beautiful animals, which I know Greg's going to talk about. But I highly encourage, if you're down in that area, to visit the Lemur Center. So let me go ahead, and by the way, I meant to bring this. One of my favorite running t-shirts is from 20 years ago. It was called the Run for the Lemurs. And it's a raggedy t-shirt now, but it's got lemurs, and it's a unique shirt because you see all these running shirts with great causes that they're running for, but the Run for the Lemurs shirt really stands out. And I just did the Lemur Center's virtual race, which I love these virtual races because you can fudge your times when you submit them. But anyway, Greg began his appointment as executive director of the Duke Lemur Center in 2019. He served as the director of operations for the Lemur Center since 2008. He has worked in the research zoological community since 1988 and has worked with some of the country's best zoological organizations, including SeaWorld, the Shed Aquarium in Chicago, where he helped launch its first marine mammal program, and the Chicago Zoological Society, where he was the curator of marine mammals. He's helped with formed several consortiums within the U.S. and internationally that advance the care and welfare of Atlantic bottlenose dolphins and California sea lions. He's worked with universities to open zoological collections to researchers to advance significant discovery and enhance conservation efforts. He has a bachelor's degree from Wittenberg University and a certificate in marine biology from Duke University, which they also have a great marine lab. I think that's in Beaumont, North Carolina, and earned a master's in biology from Western Illinois University. So Greg, we really appreciate you taking time out today from Durham, North Carolina, and it's all yours.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I have to tell you just a little bit about myself to begin with. You know, the Kiwanis have been a part of my life for a long time. My dad was a lifelong member up until he died about a decade ago. But it was the Kiwanis who gave me my first college scholarship that got me into my undergraduate program at Wittenberg. So I have a very fond place in my heart for the Kiwanis. So thank you for giving me some time to talk to you about lemurs today. My talk, and I'm going to share my screen here in just a minute, will give you a very high overview of what the Lemur Center is and what the Lemur Center does. Other than Graham, I imagine he's probably the only one who's ever been on grounds here before. And honestly, I had never heard of the Lemur Center before I was recruited here. Actually, I was in Chicago. I was working at that time for Chicago Zoological Society, and actually had spent some time in Indianapolis with the zoo there, with their marine mammal program, with the dolphin consortium that we put together. So I'm very familiar with Indianapolis, but out of the blue came an opportunity to join the Duke Lemur Center. And like so many people, I could think of a ring-tailed lemur, but I didn't know there were many more. So hopefully by the end of my talk today, you'll have an idea and an appreciation for how diverse lemurs are and the importance that they have. So let me share my screen here. All right, let me go back to the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to start by simply telling you a little bit about the Lemur Center. So the Lemur Center actually started in 1966. We are the largest collection and the most diverse collection of lemurs found anywhere in the world. Currently, we have about 250 animals on site, representing about 15 different species. We have another 100+ animals that we manage that are with our zoo partners. Some of them right there in Indianapolis. We have some ring-tailed lemurs there. But we work with zoos and other research facilities around the world in order to manage a population of lemurs outside of Madagascar. We're currently located, or we've always been located on just off of Duke's campus. We are part of the university. We actually started out as part of the School of Medicine, but we've transferred to the university about 30 years ago. But we sit on 70 acres, and on this slide, you can see the white diagrams or outlines here. One of the unique things about our program is the lemurs actually get to live in the forest for part of the year. And so we've broken up that 70 acres into 9 different habitats. And so about a little over a third of our animal colony gets to live out in the forest from spring until about October 15th when the temperatures here get a little bit too cool for them to be out there. We're also a living laboratory. That's how we're funded by the university. All of our research is non-invasive, but our main mission is to get a better understanding of lemurs, to help protect them and to conserve them in their natural environment of Madagascar. But as you'll see a little bit later on when I talk about our research program, we're also doing a lot that will improve the human condition. So I'm looking forward to sharing that in just a couple of minutes with you. So what is a lemur? So a lemur is a primate. They are not monkeys, and that was my mistake coming into Duke with the Duke Lemur Center. At one time speaking with our director, I said, well, they look like monkeys, and she was very quick to point out they are not monkeys. They're much older than monkeys, but they're also the most endangered group of mammals in the world right now. They're endemic to Madagascar, which means that's the only place they come from naturally. And they are one of the oldest primates in the world. So they predate apes and humans by about 40 million years. They're actually living primate fossils, and that's their value to academia, because we can see through the evolutionary history some of the changes that have taken place with their physiology. You know, and you'll hear me talk about in just a moment the story about how they've radiated throughout Madagascar, all from a single ancestral primate. And it gives us a lot of knowledge about our own origin. There's over 100 different species of them. There seems like there's more and more species of them being discovered each day. But they come in all sizes. The largest is the Indy, and then the smallest is the Mouse Lemur, which I have some photos of. And lemurs are predominantly a female-dominated society. And so it's very different than how when we put our groups together, we're looking at who's the dominant female, because she makes all of the decisions for the group, as from who's allowed to be in the group to who gets to eat when. So lemurs are broken up into two groups, the diurnals, so those animals that are active during the day, and then nocturnal, those lemurs that are only active at night. So I'm going to give you just a very brief history of Madagascar, because it's important to understanding the origin of lemurs and how they actually ended up all across the world. And I'll tell you right now, and I'll start this clip while I'm talking, and hopefully all of you will be able to see this. This is just a real quick video on Pangea. It talks about if we go back, 3 billion years, when there was one large land mass. And I'm just going to point out, so North America is located here, more in the tropics. We've got South America here, Africa, and Madagascar is going to come out of this little spot right here. But one of the important facts that I'd like to share with everybody is some of the oldest primate fossils that we find today are located in Wyoming. We have crews that go out there, do expeditions with students, and it's because at one point Wyoming was in a more tropical region, and some of the earliest primates actually lived there. So I'll start this graphic just so you can see how the continents break up. And as they start to separate, you get isolation, and it causes these different primates to evolve in different ways. So here's Madagascar down here, breaking away from Africa. See India moving up further north. And so Madagascar becomes an island nation upon itself. Some even call it the eighth continent of the world. Let me get rid of this slide. Go back. There you go. Sorry, real quick. Get rid of that. Sorry, give me just a second here. Sorry, folks. Try this one more time. Let me just scroll down here. So we're looking at Madagascar separating from Africa, and basically it isolates lemurs. And so lemurs actually start to show up. Sorry. So lemurs show up from Africa, but as I said, Madagascar becomes so isolated from the rest of the world that for 60 million years then it creates its own vegetation, its own other animals. And you'll see They're known for the number of reptiles that they have. In addition to having 33% of the world's primates, they have a majority of unique or endemic reptiles found just in Madagascar. You know, you see amphibians as small as your thumbnail sitting on there. So it's a huge biological hotspot, not only just for lemurs, but for amphibians, reptiles, and even birds. So as I talked about, the introduction of lemurs to Madagascar started crossing the Mozambique Channel. And our previous director, Ann Yoder, did her PhD thesis on this, is that there's huge storms that sent vegetative rafts across this channel only to land on the coast of Madagascar. And once they get there, this is a huge island nation. And they're able to just expand and fill every single niche and ecosystem on the island. And for 60 million years, they live without any predators per se. Eventually, Fusa come along. It's a cat-like predator. It's actually more closely related to the mongoose. And they start to as I said, the lemurs start to radiate and fill every single island. At one point on the island, there's a gorilla-sized lemur, which is now extinct. But it just gives you an idea about how they end up there and then continue to proliferate for so long. So then next question is, how did they end up here at Duke? And just like with most things, it's by accident. There's a professor here at Duke who was involved in a lawsuit after he and several professors participated in a civil rights action against a restaurant that refused to serve African Americans. And so he was arrested. His case went to trial here in North Carolina, here in Durham. And it ended in a mistrial, but the court wouldn't release him from the docket. They used a legal maneuver that meant every time court was in session, he had to show up and sit there, but they never were compelled to call his case again. And as a professor who was filing for grants, anytime that he put in a grant submittal, he always had to sign that there was a court decision pending against him. And so he went to the Supreme Court in order to get it removed or to get the case settled. And in the end, the Supreme Court sided with him. And it's the reason that we have the right to a speedy trial. So it was the cornerstone legislation for the 1974 Speedy Trial Act. But it also led to the creation of the Lemur Center, because one of his legal supporters who donated money was a professor from Yale. And he was being recruited here at Duke one day. And so Peter Cloffer, who was the defendant, went to thank him. And along the lines, they started talking, and Duke was recruiting this professor. His name was John Butner-Janich. And so he started talking to Peter about, is there an opportunity for me to bring my primate colony down to Duke? And so Peter was doing work out here where the Lemur Center is currently, but he had deer and goats out here. And so together they ended up writing a grant to the National Science Foundation, got $500,000 to build the first building. And in 1966, they launched the Lemur Center. So that's how lemurs ended up here at Duke. Our mission is basically to advance science, scholarship, and biological conservation through non-invasive research, community-based conservation, and public outreach and education. I'm going to focus on those three, the research, conservation, and education right now. So currently, we have a very small education program compared to most zoos in the country, and we're not a zoo, so keep in mind that we're a research facility. But we do allow about 35,000 visitors annually to come on site. and we show them the lemurs, and they get to see some of the research that's going on here. We support summer programs, so we do K through 12 programs on site. As part of that program, we bring kids into the natural habitat enclosures with the lemurs so that they can see them up close, and again, to see some of the research that's actually going on here. We also do summer programs for kids in Madagascar, and this really segues into our conservation program as well. You can't have a conservation program without doing some education. And so we provide funding to bring the kids into the forest of Madagascar. Many of the kids are coming in from the cities outside, and this is one of our tour guides, just showing the kids the bamboo forest and some of the animals that live there. We also do internships for college students and recent grads. So we have up to about 30 interns each year. They learn how to help prepare the diets for the lemurs. They also help take care of the enclosures and learn how to do field research. They also work with our veterinary staff. Some of them get to do that. Some of them also get to work with our enrichment department in order to learn more about animal welfare. As part of our education program, we also work with professionals in Madagascar. So this is a photo of our senior veterinarian in Madagascar working with 2 Malagasy veterinarians. And so part of what we do is teach them how to care for a lemur from a medical perspective. Our 2 veterinarians on site are the world's leading experts on lemur medicine, and so it's important for us to be able to give back. So we spend time in Madagascar with veterinary schools and with veterinary students. We also bring veterinarians to the Lemur Center from Madagascar, and this is our most recent veterinarian. Here they get to do more hands-on clinical diagnosis. They participate in surgical procedures and just routine medical exams, experiences that they don't get in Madagascar. A lot of the veterinarians that graduate from vet school in Madagascar go 6 years without doing any hands-on work with the animals. So we're trying to help that. Currently, there are 5 veterinarians in Madagascar that have experience working with lemurs. And this segues into our conservation program. So just a quick refresher. So Madagascar is an island nation. It's actually the 4th largest island in the world. If you were to line up the northern tip of Madagascar with the eastern seaboard of the United States, it would stretch from Maine down to Florida. So that's how big that island is. And along the line and along that distance, you have mountain regions, so you have varying climates. This map just shows, this light green is rainforest ecosystem here, but as you get further south and to the west, you're into desert, and then you're into dry hardwoods up in the north. So the climates change, so our conservation approach has to be multifaceted. It's not a one-size-fits-all. The current population of Madagascar is about 27 million people, and it's one of the fastest growing populations in the world. Currently, we're working in this area in the northeastern part of the island. It's called the Sava region. It's our community our conservation program is community-based, and it focuses on the people as well as the land. This is a very proud people. Very deeply embedded into their culture is the respect for their ancestors by following traditions, but it's also an extremely poor country, which creates a lot of challenges. You see families literally moving into the forest and cutting down the forest sections and then starting these fires for slash and burn agriculture. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to clear land to plant food or like rice and other plants just to survive to grow enough to feed their families. So you can't go into these areas and say, protect the lemurs, don't protect the forest, when the alternative is starving. So what we're trying to do is work with them for advancing agricultural techniques that preserve the land and also the lemurs, and protecting natural habitat for the lemurs. One of the things that we do is we created these small stoves. This is typical traditional cooking in their homes. They bring in charcoal and other wood, and it's not healthy for people, nor is it good for the forest. So we have these small rocket stoves that use less wood and produce less smoke. It's safer for people to use. We also bring in work with in other NGOs, Marie Stopes, to provide medical services to the community. As I said, it's an extremely poor country, and so this is part of our conservation program, is to provide better medical care for them. We also do a lot of education for the community. This is I'm not sure if you can see in the back there, this is a Duke student who's doing some biology classes for local high school students in Madagascar. The other slide, we run teacher workshops. We've developed our own conservation-based curriculum, and so we teach roughly 200 teachers a year how to use that curriculum in their classrooms. One of the biggest things that we're trying to do is stop the hunting of lemurs. So they're being hunted for several things. One, for the pet trade, but they're also being hunted just for subsistence. You know, it's hard to tell a family stop hunting lemurs when lemurs are the only protein source that family has. We're working on campaigns right now to try to educate the population about why hunting lemurs is bad, not only for lemurs, but also for human nutrition. And we're also providing alternatives. So one of the things that we're doing is we're building these fish farms in the local communities around natural reserves. We literally build the fish farms with the community. We provide the money for them. And we also provide a fish expert who brings in this species here. It grows very quickly, and it actually is fed a lot of the plant-based waste from the village. And so each fall, we end up draining the fish pond, and a third of the catch stays with the village, and it is their protein source. A third of it gets released back into natural waterways, and then a third of it is sold to raise money for the village. So it helps move them away from having to move into the forest or having to hunt lemurs in order to survive. Our research program here, and I mentioned this earlier, is all non-invasive. And we work with researchers all around the world. I always tell people we're kind of like the Switzerland of Duke. It doesn't matter where your appointment is. If you have a research project and it's non-invasive, you can submit it to the Lemur Center and we'll consider it. Our research focuses on a variety of different topics here, and I listed just a few of them, and this is what we've studied over the past year. But what I want to just focus on right now is two particular projects with some of our smaller species. So on the left here, these are mouse lemurs, and as you can see from what their name reflects, is they look a lot like mice, but they're actually primates, and they're actually the world's smallest primates. And on the right are fat-tailed dwarf lemurs, a little bit bigger, about the size of a squirrel. I'm going to tell you about the research that we're doing with these animals right now. So mouse lemurs, as I said, are the world's smallest primate. Their lifespan is about 10 years old. When you reach 7 as a mouse lemur, you're into the geriatric years. The other interesting feature about them is that they tend to develop plaques and tangles in the brain similar to human Alzheimer's patients. And so that makes them very unique in the terms of medical science. One of the things that we're doing here with these guys is we're working on a research project to better understand the aging of the brain that could help support Alzheimer's research and dementia research. And we're doing that, we're utilizing our ability to actually work with these animals in a unique setting. One, we can do cognitive testing, This isn't a mouse lemur, obviously, but I put this up here. We've taught the animals to participate in cognitive studies before, where they have to make a choice, and we set it up as a game. In this particular model, this animal's doing a color study, and it's taught to always choose the red square. So we're taking this particular cognitive test and we're applying it to mouse lemurs using iPhones. And all we're asking them to do is to select a series of shapes in a particular sequence. Now, over time, if their cognitive function starts to diminish, they'll forget the task. And we actually have an objective way of measuring their cognitive function over their lifespan. The other part of our study is looking at brain imaging. Here at Duke, we have some of the most incredible imaging labs in the world. And one of the abilities, since these animals are so small, is we have the ability to take them to these labs. And with mild sedation, we can get high detailed brain scans, and we are able to detect the presence of plaques and tangles as they develop in real time. One of the problems with detecting Alzheimer's in humans in the presence of plaques and tangles is you can only do it after the patient dies. So with this species, we can do it in real time. The other part of our study to better understand this disease is to map the genome of the mouse lemur, which has been done. And so we're in the process right now working with several scientists and comparing it to the human genome and looking for shared loci as to where in the genome does those who are susceptible to Alzheimer's, is there a gene that's actually correlating with that? And is that gene shared with humans? Since these are primates, the likelihood is greater that they'll share that particular gene, as opposed to studying rats and mice, which are even further down the evolutionary trail. So that's just some of the research that we're doing with the mouse lemurs. The fat-tailed dwarf lemurs is equally exciting for us. So fat-tailed dwarf lemur, it's about the size of a small squirrel. They have a really unique physiology. So their heart rate is about 300 beats per minute. The core body temperature is about 98 degrees, so very similar to humans. But they've adapted a physiological response in Madagascar for getting through periods of time when food resources may be very scarce. And it's a process called torpor. So torpor is similar to hibernation, but more complex in several ways. In torpor, the animal almost goes into a state of suspended animation. And I'll show you what how their physiology changes. So when they go into torpor, so this animal's heart rate goes from 300 beats per minute down to 6 beats per minute. Their respiration goes from about 70 breaths per minute down to breathing once every 5 to 10 minutes. And their body temperature falls to 2 degrees above ambient on average. So these animals live in a part of Madagascar in high altitude where it gets below freezing. And sometimes we found them in areas where their core body temperature is at 34 degrees. So you pull them out of these nests and out of these areas that they're torporing in, they're unresponsive, they're cold, their heart's barely beating, and there's no respiration. So they look like they're dead. But they're in this state of suspended animation, and during that time, their metabolism has almost stopped, but not completely. They get their name because they store fat in their tail during the summer months when food is more plentiful. And it's during that torpor season that they're actually burning the fat in that tail to get them through the periods to when food is more readily available. For some animals, their torpor strategy is to go down and do deep dives over a period of months. And so you'll see an animal torpor for up to 4 to 5 months during the year. But the torpor isn't just a sustained state. They have to come out of the torpor state every 2 or 3 weeks in order to sleep. So when we sleep, we recharge the delta waves of our brain, and that's why we can't go more than 24 to 36 hours without sleep, because our those delta waves actually control the involuntary systems. So our ability to control our body temperature or our heartbeat. So it's important. That's why we have to recharge the delta waves of our brain. We can only do that during sleep. It's the same for these animals as well, but they can go much longer periods of time without doing that. And that leads us to asking a lot of interesting questions that will lead us hopefully to, and I'll show you in just a minute here, some of the work that we're doing with NASA in these animals to better understand this mechanism. We also are studying torpor in the wild. And I'm going to show you just a quick video clip here. So this is a researcher, our researcher here who's studying torpors in Madagascar, and she's working with some of her Malagasy counterparts. And they have fit several of the fat-tailed dwarf lemurs with radio collars, and they use a tracking system. And this species hibernates in the ground. So you can see the researcher pulling the animal out of the ground. The animal's aroused, obviously it's been awakened from the torpor state. They're putting it in the bag. They're going to take it to a laboratory. They're going to weigh the animal, take a fat sample. And you'll see in the next clip, you see how they're careful to put the nest back. And you'll see in this next clip, them actually returning the animal to that same site. So a few hours have gone by. And so we do this with about 20 to 30 animals each year in the northwestern part of the Malagasy island in a very dry hardwood forest. You can see the animal goes back into the hole. They'll reposition the soil and ground cover so that it can continue torporing. And by gaining this data, it gives us a better insight into how the whole torpor mechanism works. And then, so then usually the question is, so what implications does this have? Well, as I mentioned, we've been working with NASA for a few years. NASA's actually in the active process of designing a human torpor chamber right now. It's the only way that they're going to be able to do deep space travel. And so the best way to figure out how to do it is to study a primate model. And so fat-tailed dwarf lemurs are the only primate in the world that are obligatory hibernators or torpors. And so that's some of the implications that we have. There's also medical implications with torpors. Say if you have an organ that's failing and there's not a donor that's available, the likelihood that you have the gene that would stimulate torpor in your DNA is pretty good because it's already in a primate species, but it's probably turned off. So one of the things that we're doing with the fat-tailed dwarf lemurs is mapping their genome to try to figure out where that gene is, and then we'll do a comparison with humans. So if you were somebody who needed an organ transplant but a donor wasn't available, they could trigger the torpor response in you to get you to the point to where a donor was available and bring you out of it. So that's just a very quick overview of everything that we're doing here at the Lemur Center. If you want to learn more, we actually have an event coming up at the end of October that it's a 60-minute virtual event. It's free, but it talks a lot about some of the research that we've done, some of the scientists we've inspired, and some of you may be aware of the Kratt brothers, Martin Kratt, who did Subumafu. It's a kids series on PBS about 15 years ago. Is a Duke grad. He was out here at the Lemur Center, so he's going to be our co-host for the event. And that's pretty much it. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you know a little bit more about lemurs now.
Greg, I know at least twice as much about lemurs as I did before. That was, can you put me into torpor and wake me up when COVID is over?
You're in line right behind me.
So I appreciate that very much. I mean, I wasn't sure what route we were going to take with your presentation, and that is just stunning that there is so much to learn within that subset of the animal kingdom. So the one question, selfishly, I like to ask, just looking at your biography, is can you describe what it's like to have your life threatened by a walrus?
Yes, it's from my early days at SeaWorld. I tell you, it brings you a very profound respect for those animals very quickly.
But yeah, so if so Greg might break out in a sweat, but so he was told not to let the walrus get him in a corner.
Yeah, that's right. So this was literally, I'd been a trainer with SeaWorld for about 6 weeks, and the folks that I was working with asked if I wanted to do a play session with a walrus, and I said, absolutely, I want to do that. And the only advice I got before I got in the water was, don't let her get you in a corner. And within about 20 seconds, I was in a corner. And so she just gave me a great big hug and took me to the bottom of the pool. And fortunately, there were people around who were able to get her attention and let me go. And I always tell people the worst part of that story is her name was Slowpoke. And so she was very, as I said, she got me into a corner very quickly. So thankfully, a lot of the safety guidelines have increased at SeaWorld since that time, but it's certainly one of the memories I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.
I'll also carry that memory of you with me. But no, so there are a lot of good questions. So just one or two. What kind of personalities do the lemurs display if you were to compare them to an animal which we are familiar with?
Sure. So I'll tell you, just like with dogs, cats, and other animals that we care for, you see a wide range of personalities. You see those that are really bold, you see some that are more timid, and it's the same for the animals here. You know, one of the fortunate things about the Lemur Center being a living laboratory and being dedicated to non-invasive research is that we actually get to see those personalities develop. And so it helps us in deciding, you know, how to provide better welfare for each of the animals. It helps us when we're trying to figure out what would be enriching in their environment. And so you get the full spectrum. You really do. You have actually I will say that one of the things we were very careful about doing is not imprinting ourselves on these animals. Almost all of the infants that are born here are raised by their parents, and that's incredibly important because our conservation breeding program that we have here on site is part of an international genetic safety net. So lemurs being as endangered as they are in the wild, the population here at Duke, the population at Indianapolis Zoo, the population at any of these zoos across the US and in Europe are potential founders for reintroducing these species back to Madagascar if they ever became extinct. And it's important that they have a lot of those natural behaviors, those natural instincts in order to survive.
That's fantastic. And then, so as far as the relationship with Madagascar, are they able to provide new areas as the rainforest is victim to slash and burn farming?
So there's a lot of reserves that have been set up, and we're working in the area that we're actually working with the Missouri Botanical Garden up in that northeastern part of Madagascar. About 8 years ago, Madagascar had a coup, and their legal government was overthrown, and so a lot of the international support that they were receiving was cut off, and so the illegal government of Madagascar started opening up the forest to other countries like China and some of the South American countries to come in and harvest rosewood and a lot of these areas that were protected. And so the Lemur Center actually stepped in. Our staff got video of what was happening and sent it out to the international press. And they were a huge partner in helping to tell the story of what was actually going on the ground in Madagascar. The other thing that we did is we raised money for the gendarmes, so the guards that protect the national forest. And so we were able to increase the number of patrols in these protected areas in order to try to protect what was happening to not just lemurs, but all of the animals in those areas. We're working with several private landowners right now to try to increase the designation of natural reserves on the island. And so it's a slow process, but to answer your question, yes, we're trying to identify more protected areas. And more importantly, I think areas that serve as corridors, because you'll see in Madagascar, areas that transect across the island from east to west that are important for a lot of the species to survive, you know, the normal migration routes and things like that. And so that's where our immediate focus is.
That's fantastic. So Greg, thanks so much again for your time today. Thanks to Graham for lining this up. A small donation is going to be made in your name to Project 44, an Indianapolis-based nonprofit created to raise awareness of the National Bone Marrow Donor Registry, the need for donors, and the impact a donation of bone marrow can have on a child or adult battling illness. Next week, October 22nd, Chris Denari, television announcer for the Indiana Pacers is going to join us. Everybody have a great rest of your week. And thanks again, Greg, for your time, and everybody be safe.
Thank you. Thank you.